on this proposal. I guess it's actually in the works for tomorrow, the jolly conversation around death that we're proposing. And so I know Doug can't be here today, so it's just you and me. I wanted to do something fresh and interesting if we're going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not an easy thing to talk about in a way that's fresh and interesting, because so much of it is fraught with tons of baggage. So I was hoping that it would be useful for you and myself to just sort of do a little clean language around this topic.
It'll give me good practice. I haven't had a lot of practice other than watching you do it.
Cool, cool. Well, I will ask a few clean questions and around this topic, and we can just take it from there. But first of all, we'll do a little clean start, just for this session to be useful for you. This session will be like what?
Will be like sitting in the backyard having a cup of tea with my fellow ghost.
Sitting in the backyard, cup of tea with your fellow ghost. And when? Sitting in the backyard with a cup of tea with your fellow ghost, you will be like what?
I will be like the person standing at that place before you go on stage, where you got a little bit of nervous energy, but it's also blended with excitement. And yeah, there might be a little bit of a level of intense nervous excitement.
And that person standing right before you going on stage, and the nervous energy blended with excitement. And what support do you need from me, or what resources do you have so that this can happen in this session?
I think the support that I would need is an honest, open listening, and also a look of support. The resources that I have are the willingness to take a risk.
Thank you. Okay, great. I guess for me, for this session to be really useful for me, the session will be I'm just seeing two figure skaters. Sliding, or maybe not figure skaters. Oh, I'm actually getting swans.
Swans?
See swans floating across a lake on a summer day. And for me, for this to happen, I would be like the guy sitting in a boat, a rowboat, with an umbrella, with a kind of parasol over my head to protect me from the sun, and a nice book that I can thumb through while I sort of gaze at the water. Actually, it's not a book that I'm reading. It's actually more like a journal that I'm taking notes. And so the support I need is actually pretty much what you were talking about, an honest, open listening. And the curiosity.
Yeah, right.
And so with all of that, which is actually quite a lot, we've already explored, I'm wanting to look at death as the topic that has been proposed for us to explore. And so I thought what I would do is just ask a few clean questions and just take it from there.
Okay,
Okay?
that's fine.
And when death,
Did you say death or death? Dead.
death,
Okay.
that's the topic that he was.
Okay. Okay.
And when death, what kind of death is that?
What comes up is the death of my divorce.
Ah, the death of your divorce.
Yeah.
And when the death of your divorce, is there anything else about that death?
Intense anguish.
Intense anguish. And when intense anguish, what would you like to have happen?
That that it would have a different meaning than it did.
And have a different meaning than it did. And to have a different meaning than it did. What kind of different? When different meaning?
That there was a coming together rather than falling apart.
A coming together rather than falling apart. And is there anything else about coming together?
It was the dream that I had.
It was a dream that you had. And when it was a dream that you had, whereabouts is that dream? Does it have a size or a shape?
It's in and all over my body.
It's in and all over your body. And when it's in and all over your body, whereabouts in and all over?
The central centrality is in the heart, but there seems to be a arms and legs peripheral
And,
sense.
and peripheral sense.
Yeah, that extend out from the central of the heart. The arms and legs are extending out.
And extends out in arms and legs, and centrality in heart. And when centrality in heart, whereabouts in heart? Is there a size or shape?
Whereabouts is the size and the shape of the heartbeat, of the in between the beats of the heart, and that size and shape goes back and forth between small and large.
And in between beats of the heart, and back and forth between large and small. And when in between the beat, is there anything else about in between?
There's a presence that is larger than myself.
Presence that is larger than yourself. And when a presence larger than yourself, how much larger is that presence than yourself?
I don't know. I have no way of knowing.
And you don't know, no way of knowing. And that presence larger than yourself, and back and forth from large to small. Is there anything else about that presence larger than yourself?
Peacefulness.
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 And is that peacefulness? Is there anything else about that peacefulness?
It's the only thing I can count on.
And the only thing I can count on. And when the only thing that I can count on, what kind of I is that I? When peacefulness is the only thing I can count on.
It's a mix of child and adult.
Mix.
Another word would be probably sage-like.
Sage-like. And when sage-like, whereabouts is sage-like?
Ah, that is a mystery I do not know.
A mystery I do not know. And when a mystery I do not know, what kind of mystery is that mystery?
Mhm. Only word that comes to mind is love.
And love. And whereabouts is that love?
It is felt in my heart, but without boundary.
Ah. and in my heart, but without boundaries. And when love in my heart and without boundaries and sage-like in a mix of child and adult, what happens to child when a mix of child and adult?
It is saved.
Ah, it is saved. And when it is saved, what happens to adult?
It is free.
It is free. And when child is saved and adult is free, what happens? Is there a relationship between that and presence larger than self?
A relationship without conflict.
Uh, and a relationship without conflict. And when a relationship without conflict, what happens to intense anguish?
It dies.
And when it dies, then what happens?
Baby Buddha is born.
Baby Buddha is born.
Or maybe, I just want to add this because I feel this too. Jesus is born.
And Jesus is born. Is that a good place to pause?
I think so. I think so.
Or you
That was
start floating?
yeah, yeah,
That's my metaphor.
yeah.
Um, well, I would invite you, if you want to make some sort of sketch or something that makes sense to you,
Hmm.
that represents uh, this experience.
Okay,
And take all the time you need, and I'm just going to sip my coffee and look at my
okay.
note as the swans float.
Cool. Okay, I got it.
Okay, I'm ready too. Can you share your sketch?
Tell me if you can see it good.
Yeah, hold it up a little bit higher and a little bit closer, if you can, and a little higher. Okay, yeah, I see it.
Okay, so in the center is blackness, is black, dark. And then there's red around the black. And then all the rest of the colors are shades in, except there's yellow as a boundary, broken permeable boundary. I'm also pissing down,
Kissing down.
kind of releasing all the all the anguish. Then I surround the picture with darkness, but then I put stars of different colors on the edges. And notice that I put the arms and legs, but it's a ball. And there is eyes and a nose, but there's no skull.
Ah, eyes and nose, but no skull. And stars of different colors. And kissing down all of that anguish. And a permeable boundary. And black and dark in the center, and red around, and shaded.
Yeah, with there's shades of green, yellow. Yeah, green and yellow
Green and yellow.
shades. Yeah, mainly green and yellow.
And mainly green and yellow. And with all of that, what are you most drawn to?
I'm actually most drawn to the center, the darkness surrounded by the red.
And is there anything else about that darkness surrounded by the red?
Yeah, it's like blood leaving your body from the darkness of that before was within your body that was dark, hidden. So it's like out of darkness, red blood bleeds out of darkness.
Red blood bleeds out of darkness.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And as you were drawing, I was drawing. I don't know
Yeah.
if you can see this.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lake, and there's an image here of a boat,
Yeah.
and there's two figures. I'm in my back, that's my back, and I'm facing this shadowy figure, this sort of ghost-like form at the end of the boat. And above it is this golden light. So there's a connection this figure has with this golden light.
Oh, okay.
And in the background, on this big lake, you can see an earthquake, not an earthquake, what do you call that? A volcano
Yes, right.
that has erupted, but is now sleeping quietly, but with it's still a little bit of ash floating in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And over here, coming out of the lake, is a strange kind of animal, mammal, perhaps a kind of whale or a porpoise, maybe a Moby Dick kind of, but not It's not a violent Moby Dick. It's much more of a Moby Dick that has, I don't know, found some sort of ecological
Mm-hmm.
arrangement, some sort of living arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this figure that's communicating to me in the boat that he has come from the golden light,
Mm. Yeah.
and he has a message for me
Mm.
that I asked him why he's come back,
Mm-hmm.
because he was killed, and I grieved for him
Mm.
terribly. He
Mm-hmm.
came from the golden light, he tells me,
Mm.
to say that the golden light, that I have to let him go so that he can continue.
Mm.
Because my grief, he says, is holding him back.
Ah.
This is
Ah.
the message from the golden light to me.
Okay. Okay.
So since I'm processing this right now, that there's a loop between the golden light, my dead friend Charles,
Mm-hmm.
myself, and we're sharing
Mm-hmm.
the same boat. So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of invisible, and I'm still embodied in a physical form, but there's still a relationship. And my grief has been modified since he was killed 40 years ago.
Ah.
And,
Okay.
and my life collapsed.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to pretend that it's come back together. But I was able to get the message that I'm holding this person back by
Ah.
grieving for this person.
Uh-huh.
And that was a big deal. It's like, oh, okay, I got the message. It's time to let go, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It doesn't mean you don't miss the person.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't mean that you don't grieve for the life that will not happen, because there was lots of potential
Right.
that went down the tubes. And
Mm.
no person, in my view of the world, or every person actually, is irreplaceable.
Yes. Yes.
So that's
Yes.
part of, I guess, growing up.
Yeah, it
To
is.
to each relationship with that awareness
Mm-hmm.
could be a blessing, because I'm not going to take this relationship for granted.
Ah.
That this person has something immense, because this person is connected to that golden light.
Yeah.
So I have to pay extra special attention.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Right, right, right.
So,
I agree.
so thank you for sharing your experience and for
Well,
giving me the opportunity to share mine, because I hadn't really expected to open that up.
ah,
This was a kind of drawing that I started about a year ago and wasn't able to finish until
oh, wow.
this moment right now, because I felt like there's a relational space
Very
where we
nice.
explore this topic in a
Yeah.
creative way.
Can I ask you a question, John?
Sure.
So I'm just checking in. So it's safe even across this boundary of technology.
Yes. Yes, I think so.
Because I know that I asked that question because I know that you've made it clear, how sensitive you are to this technology and how it can affect all of us, not just you.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, I feel like we have created intentionally a space
Mm-hmm.
that is safe enough
Mm-hmm.
so that we can go to, I'm using the level, higher or
Yeah.
deeper, whichever way you want to use it. But I
Mm-hmm.
think is a chunking down and chunking slow happening in this particular conversation that allows for better communications to flow,
Yes. Right.
rather than, rattling off 101 footnotes from the 1,000 articles you read this week. Which
Well,
does
yeah,
not turn into integration. It just turns into more confusion. And I'm
it does.
that, and I think a lot of people are in this technology.
It does. And just to be transparent, I notice it's interesting you bring that up, because part of my work with my attention is to notice that that's a natural in the sense that that comes up, but this idea of attention that's been part of the thread, and where we put our attention given a certain circumstances that arise, I've learned now that I can accept that, okay, yeah, I had footnotes, but shut up, Mike, listen to John. I mean, it's not like, if I was to try to force that stuff not to come up, it would make it worse, and I probably would act from that place. But by giving it free, the image I have for it is what Suzuki Roshi once said about the notion of control: give a cow plenty of room to move.
Okay. And tension and attention.
Yeah.
And I think you made a gesture there over was it your left ear?
Here?
It was that side of your head, over there. Yeah. You
I
made
made
it
just
over there.
okay.
And that gesture, and you were talking about tension and attention. Right over there.
Oh, over here?
A little closer to your head when you made the gesture.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about that?
Oh, yeah, because it's tense in here to pay attention. There's a certain intensity and tension that comes with paying attention.
Uh-huh.
And so how do you, I mean, just all three of those words, how do they work together? Attention, intensity, intention, tension. How do they those are words, but those are different in my experience. They're like different movements of watching different waves flowing at the same time.
Oh, the movement of two waves
Yeah.
at the same time. Is there anything else about that movement?
Well, it has a certain the intensity, and sometimes it has a certain it affects my impulse control.
And it affects your impulse control. And then what happens?
Well, that's kind of up in the air. What I want to say is, the more that I've embraced attention as a way of, like in Zen, to work with all of it, then my impulses are disciplined. I don't want to say controlled, but disciplined, because control is too strong a word. But discipline includes control, but discipline means learn too, of the relationship between attention and impulse.
And when an impulse is disciplined, that's like what?
Oh, when it's done at my best, it's like a fine dancer or a fine kick-ass martial artist.
A fine dancer and a fine kick-ass artist. That sounds great. And what I guess, because I feel like we've gone pretty deep, pretty fast, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
We've worked half an hour.
We what?
We've worked half an hour.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I think there's something interesting that happens when we're working with clean language and working with the language, the underneath, the above, the next to, the beyond. You know, we use these words, and yet each of us has a whole range of affects that are idiosyncratic to each of us. And I think this is another thing that gets lost in some of our, you know, if we don't chunk down and chunk slow, we'll never know about these kinds of differences, because we're just prone to enter into conversations and interpret things and feed that back as best we can. But I think there's a nature that, for me, there's a difference, and I believe we've demonstrated it today, between conversation and clean language, which is not a conversation. This is much more about looking very carefully at the language that the person uses, asking open-ended questions about that language, which is not what I do when I have a conversation. I'm saying, oh yeah, I know what you mean. I had this experience the other day, and this, and that. And we talk, and that's can be enjoyable and very creative. And also, there's something else that's going on, which is not like a conversation, but that I believe is much more like a ritual. So we're temporarily sort of creating this space where we explore. Perhaps I'm playing around with my own language here. We get to something that's more quantum. And this is where my interest in researching the flip, and Alexander Wendt, who's written a book on the quantum and the quantum brain in sociology, or the quantum mind in sociology. And this new quantum capacities that we're just starting to figure out, and what could that mean for us socially? I think these are the kind of topics that I feel are of enormous interest to me, but we can't do this, in my view, without a method. Just like when they do those preliminary experiments that differentiated particle from wave, you know, those famous experiments, which are nobody understands really.
Yeah, no.
We have lots of theories,
Right.
And lots of stories, and a lot of metaphors. So I believe that this, in a way, is sort of analogous. The clean language is kind of analogous to those early experiments that differentiated particle from wave. Because I think many of our language, actually, we use a word, but the word ripples and echoes.
Oh yeah.
Vibrates
Well,
with other senses and with other sensoriums, like another person.
Words like atoms have energy and they have movement.
That's
you know,
right.
and that.
And it can be missing, or it can be creative, or a little bit.
Well, and see, this is where attention comes in to me. I mean, anything that human beings tend to create, and usually that creation has a history of survival.
That's right.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I know we can take it beyond just a survival thing. In fact, the survival thing, from my point of view, is almost like the spark to get you to create. But it's more, the creation is larger than survival. And I wanted to ask you a question about, I understand there's a difference between clean language and conversation, and I don't disagree with that. But for me, I'd like to hear from you. There seems to be some touch points that cross back and forth.
That's right.
And that's where I pay attention. As much as I appreciate your clean language and your use of it, and if you haven't guessed already, probably because I've been more influenced by Eugene Glendale and the focusing method, which the two I've read where the two can work together, but they have their own differences, you know.
That's right.
You know, and that focusing method, I picked up that book when I was 23 years old, and I don't know how many times, and I've just gone back because when it comes to attention, how do I have, now this is where I'm at now, John, is not a split binary notion of focus of being super concentrated or super diffuse and lackadaisical, but where's that sweet spot? And it's just like Aikido, finding your center. Work with a center that's dynamic, not that can move, not just be stuck. It can stop, full stop if it has to, you know. But it's a dynamic center, not, you know, what people may consider kind of overly rooted and static.
And a sweet spot and a dynamic center. And when a sweet spot and a dynamic center, is there anything else about, or whereabouts is that center?
It's at the perineum. It's right. It's right in the. It's that hatha and martial arts or yoga. You know, it's your root chakra. You know, right next to the perineum, because the perineum pulls things up, brings or down, or, you know, that's the chakra that works both. This is interesting. I'm sorry, I'm going to digress, and this has just popped in my head. I think people, or no, I won't do that. That's generalizing. I feel each of those centers, they're not just armored. It's open and closed at both ends of the center or its sides. There's a permeability of each of those centers, so that you know, things can flow up. So there can be a flow through the centers, but sometimes there's a need to contract. I guess there's an oscillation within each of the centers, I guess, of opening and closing, I guess I would say. And I'm going to tie this into death, our subject, because I think that very, very oscillating opening and closing is the non-binary of birth and death. And this is just coming through me right now of articulating it, even though it's been swimming around in my head for a long time.
And it's been swimming around in your head for a long time. And death and non-binary of birth, death, and oscillating, opening and closing, and the flow. And you asked me earlier about a touch point.
Yeah.
And even though that was your metaphor, and maybe we've developed it, I believe I have that's very compatible to my felt sense. And you mentioned focusing, and some of us here have explored quantum poetics with Marco and with Jeffrey and with Heather, and who else was on those calls? Well, some of us. And I think there's the clean language and focusing in quantum poetics. I believe there's a family resemblance between these ways of working with language and the body mind.
Yes, right.
Because it is all very, I think, Eugene Gendlin, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah, that's right.
He was like the pioneer in this field of phenomenology and staying close to our experience. Now, I have some disagreements with him.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the this is sort of a different topic, but it's related, I suppose, because we
Okay.
previously, last week, we were talking about, in our last call with Doug, when Doug was here,
Mm-hmm.
about the heart of the child,
Right.
how you talk to the heart of a child,
Mm-hmm.
even though the heart of that child may be in the body of a 65-year-old person.
Yeah,
That heart of the child is still there.
I
Doesn't
agree.
may not be listened to or
Yeah,
acknowledged, but it's still
yeah,
there.
yeah,
And I believe we need to talk to that heart of the child in the adult in a way that honors the way the child processes. So when you ask for the child what they want, they're probably not going to tell you, I want a new television and a Mercedes Benz.
yeah.
They're gonna say, I want a snow cone, please.
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
A slice of pizza. And I think that's what we have to learn how to do. And what I believe, how I think, what this particular practice, how it's different from Genlin's practice, is I think Genlin was a master at what he was doing, but he tended to talk to the adult,
Mm,
adult to the adult. Whereas
mm-hmm,
what I like about clean language is it allows the adult to speak the
mm-hmm,
language of the child.
mm-hmm.
And that is, I believe, creates a great deal of capacity for integration much more
Yeah,
quickly
right.
than I found in any other technique. But I think that's because I'm very good at, what's the word for it? Regression.
Mm,
But regression isn't always the best thing to do. The best
mm-hmm.
regression can be extremely creative. Being able to go back to the 3-year-old, or the 2-year-old, the 8-year-old, or the 10-year-old, all of those different ages are still co-present in
Yes. Yes.
this physiological formation here.
Mm-hmm.
But the benefit of being able to regress carefully and with concern is that we don't get lost in the field of all
Yeah.
possibilities. We can stay centered, which is what an adult hopefully
Yeah.
has learned how to do, so that then you can cultivate those creative states
And
without lost.
and you need a safe environment to do that. You can't do that kind of work in casual conversations and stuff.
That's true.
Can't do that kind of work.
That's
Uh,
true. That's why I think this kind of ritual space, when that's the intention, of course, all rituals, all healers, and we've talked about the healer as an archetype, a
yes.
master archetype, which is undeveloped in our culture. But I think that all healers from all traditions recognize the nature of ritual, relationship, and intention.
Right.
Intention to heal, and a relationship, and a ritual. It's a win-win.
Right.
We have that natural capacity to heal these splits in our psyche.
So I just I'm going to throw this in the pot and see how you respond. We're cooking right now. We're cooking. I have a ritual to help train my attention every morning when I get up. I make my bed. I have a certain way to put my clothes on and stuff. I purposely change up the order, but I still have a ritual. And I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years how it's helped. It's grown into helping my attention be fluid, flexible. It allows for inattention. This is an interesting notion that good attention does not try to disallow or eradicate inattention. It just brings you get better able to adapt to it. It's part of it. It's part of the things I've learned from reading, just the act of reading, and also using my voice. This is one thing that is an interest in me, is the power of language and how people use it. And one reason was attracted in it is yours was another way of looking at language different than Genlin, or to put it bluntly, when I interact with other people, you know, I'm trying to be a focused listener and back and forth, and I just find people on automatic pilot with the use of their words and their expression. And when I act in the way I do of giving it more attention, I have to deal with some of the, okay, I'm just going to say immaturity.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very good one.
I try to be friendly with it though, because I have to accept that one thing that's helped my frustration, I need to accept that people don't have the same passion with language as I do. I have a very primal reason for bringing myself to the power of language, because I couldn't talk until I was 4, and I was always corrected, and so language just now it's one of those grains of sand that's turned into a pearl.
Ah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. And that 4-year-old, before he had language, and you've described your struggles with being understood by people who weren't paying attention.
Yes.
You.
Yeah.
And I was not paid attention to either. In my early years, I was, but then when the twins came, my mother was dealing with stuff she couldn't deal with.
Mm-hmm.
A 3-year-old and 2 infants.
Yeah.
And a father who couldn't hold down a job, and who was tyrannical.
Mm-hmm.
Post-traumatic stress is putting it mildly. I mean, the guy was. So we're dealing with those forces.
Yeah. Right.
And how that impacts, you know, the family mind.
Exactly. And the first group that we're in.
That's right. That's right. And so when we talk about being in groups and people are on automatic pilot, and you know, they may have a lapse of attention, or the tension, those neuromuscular locks, they can't relax them. Well, what do we do? I mean, it's so easy, and I believe we're at a crisis point because we're caught in the undertow of a lot of the undeveloped aspects of a lot of people right now.
Right. Right.
And they unfortunately have a lot of power. So I believe we're in a situation. Humanity's been here before, but not exactly, I think, to the extremes that we're in now because of our technology, which could be a blessing or a curse, depending on how we use it, and the quality of our attention and our intention. So having said that, and welcoming this, I found myself, as you said at the beginning of our dialogue today, sitting in the backyard in the ghost.
Yeah.
And then what happened to me as I was listening to that was this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is my expectation, actually, without knowing it. We can trigger one another in creative ways so that we can be in touch with the field of all possibilities here without getting lost.
I like that. Okay, so we can trigger each other in healthy way or creative ways?
So we can spot each other. That's another metaphor. Or spot each other.
Okay.
When we're doing it, we can spot each other. So we land on our heads.
Yeah. And this is.
So there are more than one metaphor. I'm sure we can come up with.
No, but like I tied it in is that, you know, when you said spotting, I went looking on Google to find that. It just because, and I intuitively, I think I just followed my intuition because I knew you had mentioned gymnastics and stuff. It was a very intuitive thing of spotting. And I felt it was an apt metaphor because one of the things I think people, and including me, I'm not let myself off the hook with this, of understanding the power of metaphor and how we use it, and what kind of tension do we bring to our metaphors, even, and they, all of them are limited, and not all metaphors fit the situation. We kind of miss metaphor sometimes, but the thing I liked about the spotting metaphor and what you were saying, even with the trigger, and I like using spotting, but what I see the two metaphors function together is the tension placed in a certain spot. Finger on the trigger, holding somebody, you know. It's like I've taken
their back, feeling their
the back and the legs, you know, there's a tension to a spot.
Yeah.
And I'm digressing, I'm sorry, but trigger has come up a lot lately in my, and I just said, yeah, you know what? I can feel my trigger on my finger on the trigger, but I'm not pulling it.
That's right. That's right.
It's that kind of, it's that, and but that's a, you know, I can imagine some people, and they just dismiss that as, you know, too much work.
Right. Right. Right.
Which
Well,
it is work. I will agree.
It can be a labor of love rather than toil, and I can't agree with you more. And I believe that to me, what I've learned today is that that we have the skills that we can sponsor one another at our best.
Yes.
And we can hold the tension and maybe even release it and connect to a much vaster range of affects and cognition as well. So that's what I think is so great about relaxing these neuromuscular locks. And you can't do that if people are yelling and screaming at you. But if you can find the relaxation, you can, I believe, rather than having other people's metaphors being imposed upon us.
Exactly.
Or their narratives imposed upon us and distorting our own sense of self, we can, you know, just start to create metaphors, just like good actors and musicians have always done. We get together, we create narratives, and we act them out together, and you know, we find the time and place to do this in a way that's safe, so that we can then, we created a boundary around that, we can leave it and go out and do other things, and not, you know, and be more functional rather than less functional. So I think that's the important thing, and the great thing about theater and the theater metaphor is we take on a mask, we put on a costume, then we take it off.
Right.
Get back in our street clothes, and we go out and live like a normal human being.
Right.
And we all know success of very great performers who have not actually been able to make that transition. They aren't able to oscillate from stage to screen to their normal life, and they create havoc for themselves. So that's why we need, I think, these rituals. You know, the curtain comes down, the curtain goes up. You know, you perform, or you do meditation, or whatever.
Yeah, and actually paying attention to the transition of whether you go on stage or come off. Right. You know, there's energy, a different energy you're taking onto the stage, and then there's energy you're trying to let go when you come off the stage. That space is something and this is one thing I'm really with you, John, on, is it's something we have to learn how to operate in. It's not beyond, but it's just like anything that we've learned in life. If we don't put a certain intention, interest, I think, comes before intention sometimes. Or how interested are you in it? That's you know, that's right. And I was thinking when you were talking, part of the thing I was thinking of when you talk about, you're right, the neuromuscular conditioning we get into as part of getting triggered, or even triggering somebody, you know, pulling the trigger on somebody else, you know, trying to trigger somebody else. And so I'll just give you my response of how, because of having a near-death experience of going over with a tractor, having to recover with my body, having the last 20 years, I've done so much work of that neuromuscular of my hips being replaced and then coming back, and that neuromuscular work of, for my meditative training, of learning to pay attention to when the pain, this is the way I put it, the way the pain reaches an intensity that triggers something. So it's I'm just going to stay with the metaphor because it works. It's not the best, but a gunfighter, a good gunfighter doesn't pull the trigger if he doesn't have to.
Right.
He's sharpened his skill to use that weapon. But if he doesn't have to pull it, he's developed a sense. He's developed the practicality of pulling the trigger, but that underlying nonverbal of needing to, that's where the space is where they learn. And that's where you get people that are not the kind of destructive gun fighters versus the one that's trying to use the same weapon to protect others.
That's right. That's right. And that can make a huge difference.
And so I have a question for you, because I'm checking the way I'm paying attention to. I think sometimes people bring attention to the functionality of something, whether it's good or bad. Just how does it function? And then you can work into the form and the content of it. But sometimes we have to start with the functionality, just like the most rawest primal function we have to work with is our ego, which I don't feel is the sum total of our identity, but it's where that's probably where the trigger is.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? Because
right.
that ego was formed in our nervous system from conditioning we had no choice in.
Right. That's right. And that's why I think as adults, we can go back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At repair work that we weren't able to do then, but we can do now.
Yeah, if we have the right people around us. Fortunately for me, I had right people around me, but you know what really saved me is my love of reading, Waking the Tiger. Just, it's that psychoactive, like you guys talked in EST musicians. I went to.
Oh, you saw that? Yeah.
I saw that. I like the content of the visceral, the way I put it, visceralness of reading.
That's right. It trains our imaginations to go
exactly.
Yeah.
And gives it new input from old, challenge. If anything else, like I tell people every time I read, I'm just doing a thought experiment,
right,
and checking it out.
I can't agree with you more. And in the spirit of the Eastern Standard Time magicians, we may have to have a bi-coastal gathering of magicians.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And I'm looking forward to our next occasion. Maybe, are you going to be there tomorrow for this?
I plan to be. I just want to. I hesitate because of my computer things going on, okay. But I plan on being there because it's a very. You probably have picked up. I've had 2 death experiences, one at my own hands and one at just being stupid, not paying attention, operating a tractor. So death has very much been a part of me for the last 20 years, having grieved a lot of deaths too.
Yeah, me too. And because it's such a difficult topic, I was really hesitant to go in there without getting grounded, as I believe we have today.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same.
Non-abstract. It's very, it's a very much with us, and how we process that can lead to enormous despair or great joy. Right. Either way, it's a flip of the same coin as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Exactly.
So I just am really glad that we have gotten this out in the open and put it into our group field. And if anyone gets a chance to watch this, I hope that they will, whatever they can, however way they're processing this, they can bring that to the cafe tomorrow.
This has been very, taken me not higher but deeper.
Cool.
Of understanding. It just with your clean language. I appreciate it very much, but I do know I gravitate to the focusing, of use of language. But listening to you I've been a rascal and sometimes use my focusing method by asking your kind of clean questions if they're appropriate
Hmm.
in a conversation. Because to me, Dan, I'm modeling one thing that you and I think is let's not take language for granted.
That's right.
That's what you and I do share,
That's right.
you know, and I'm not out to save the world. That's not it. I'm just out to be a participant in my little corner, and whatever takes place, that's what takes place.
Right. I'm trying to do both. I want to
Okay.
save the world also,
Okay.
and all of that as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm afraid I'm not very modest here. I have very big ambitions. But I think that the stuff we've been reading, like Gebser and Aurobindo and Sloterdijk, and the fiction and the poetry, and this is not, these thinkers were not modest in their ambitions. They were thinking big.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And Gindlin as well.
Yeah.
And the person who put Clean Language together,
Yeah.
David, he was a very smart dude, and he was a student of Gregory Bateson.
That I didn't know, but that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that behind these kinds of clean questions and behind what Gindlin is doing, you can get, and you've been reading, we've been in this study group on Bateson. I believe there's a family resemblance, because I think Bateson was really he really put that out there about the analogical and the digital,
Yeah.
and the verbal and the nonverbal,
Right.
and these binaries we get trapped in, and how can we go to another level where we can unravel these binds, because we can't solve the problem at the level of the problem, and this is the challenge.
No, we can't. No.
So,
And I think part of it too, from my point, is that edge of working with the kinds of people that just aren't in that space. Like you pointed to, there's a lot of people that don't, I put it this way, aren't interested in that kind of understanding their own minds. And we're surrounded by more of those than not when we're not together.
that's
And,
right.
and I imagine from what I heard about Bateson, he was surrounded by a lot of people because he was such I don't know if this is a good eclectic or whatever, kind of thinker, that I can only imagine how difficult that was
Right.
with such a brilliant person like him.
Well, and I think that as we read the flip, I think that's another good metaphor.
Oh, God, that is a good metaphor.
There are those who have flipped, and there are those who have not flipped.
Yeah, right.
And if you haven't flipped yet, you will probably, but I'm not here to, I can spot you, but I can't make it happen.
That's right. And I like too that he made clear, just because somebody's flip, and this is something I run into a lot with some spiritual people,
Right.
just because you flip doesn't mean you can't be fucking evil and destructive.
That's right. And that's why I think he didn't equate it with any moral value, the flip.
No.
And because we still got to chop wood and carry water, just like everybody else. But
he seemed to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but he seemed to kind of indicate that it could help your morals.
I think so.
It could at least, give you, not in an absolute sense, but a workable sense,
Oh, absolutely. I think that's there in his work and in the work we're doing here. And I believe it's really important that those who are either have flipped or getting ready to flip, or flipped a long time ago, if we're going to flip again, I mean, we can, I feel, create the conditions whereby this doesn't have to be traumatic.
I think
we can handle the intensity. We need to work with the intensity, because it is intense.
No, and we do, and what you triggered as a metaphor for me, you don't have to throw people to the end of the pool to teach them how to swim.
That's right.
I mean, eventually you want them to be able to swim in the deep end.
Right.
And I'm you know, I'm one of these people that I'm not going to exclude it, but I don't want it as a default.
That's
Because it could be a situation, I'm just thinking now, depending on the person that's teaching the person to swim, that person could ascertain they need to experience a little of the deep and show they have skills, because sometimes that's spotty. I mean, as long as you're right there to get them, you know, it's
I don't know.
spot.
There's a beautiful scene in the film. I can't remember the name of it. It's but it's a it won the Academy Award for Best Picture a few years ago.
Mm.
And it's about a coming of age story of a black gay man, and
Oh wow.
it's a very
Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, I remember which one.
but there's a beautiful scene where the man teaches the little boy how to swim, and I'll post it because
Okay.
it's such an exquisite. It captures that beautiful moment of oscillation
Yes.
where the man holds the little boy in the ocean
Yeah.
and lets him float in his arms so he can get adjusted.
Yeah.
So he can learn how to swim. It's a magical moment.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll post that because I feel it's sort of appropriate to our conversation today.
Yeah, I think it is, because I think this notion of the flip for me is learning how to swim, have a feeling of swimming even on land,
Yes.
that it kind of cross the elements cross over. And I'm influenced by Alan Watts because I think that was one of his things he was trying to get across is learning how to swim with life, in life, rather than just being so overly dependent on the terrestrial conditioning that we are given as human beings of having something solid underneath us.
That's right. I think that's a beautiful idea that we originated in the ocean and we're land mammals now, but we weren't always this way.
No, we weren't. No, we weren't. And so
That flow, that oceanic bliss is still there. We can tap into it.
yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the things my two death experiences have uh, rebooted my brain. Those two experiences were flips, reboots, whatever. And fortunately, I am grateful for the people around me and what's inside of me of being interested. Okay, what do I do with this fucking compost pile?
That's great. Thank you so much. I had a great.
Thank you, John. I had a good time too, and you really your clean questions and my drawing surprised me.
Bring your drawing tomorrow. I'll bring mine.
Okay.
We'll continue.
Okay.
Be continued.
To be continued. You have a good day, my friend.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.